Hi, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I can see that participants are joining. The room is slowly but surely filling up. So thank you so much for being with us today. We'll give it a few more moments for participants to join, but we're really happy to have you here with us today. My name is Yinka and I'll be hosting or facilitating today's webinar. We are starting the virtual agricultural series today. It's a series of breakfast meetings that hold every first Wednesday of the month between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. Today's our first session and we're really happy to have you here with us today. My name is Yinka, as I've said. I'm joined by Ola, my colleague, and today's speakers, who will introduce themselves shortly. But just briefly about the organizers of today, the Delegation of German Industry and Commerce. We have been in Nigeria for exactly 40 years. We're actually celebrating our 40th anniversary this month. And we're so excited to have offices in Lagos and in Abuja at the moment. We are the official representation of German business abroad. We exist in about 90 countries. We have over 110 offices, and we support German expertise and trade wherever we go. We have a couple of competence centers to do various things. Today's series is hosted by the Competence Center Agribusiness, which specifically focuses on agribusiness and related topics. With the webinar series, we also want to discuss current trending themes within Nigeria's agricultural landscape. And we're happy to have you join us for our first session, but hopefully also for the subsequent sessions. So my name is Ola Makinwa. I head the Agribusiness department and I sit in Abuja. And with us today is my colleague Ola. So over to you, Ola, for a brief introduction of yourself before we start with today's session.
Hello, everyone. It's good to have you all here. And thank you, Yinka, for the brief introduction about the virtual Agric series. For most of you who are familiar with this, it's also something we've done last year, and we think to continue the conversation and ensure that we have, we bring you up to date with the relevant market trends and see how we can also help you to make new business contacts. It's also very good for us because we think it's a good way to bring our services and some of our programs also to you, because now all of us can't meet, in person. But thanks to technology that we can all meet online. So I am the project manager for the Agribusiness Competence Center at the Delegation of German Industry and Commerce. And I wouldn't want to take too much of your time. I would just also say that this is a monthly series. So after, I think we would also share the schedule for the next session with you, so you're up to date about that. I think you would enjoy this session. I'm very, very confident of that. We have some very nice panelists and experienced speakers who would take us through this session. And one other last thing I would like to say is for housekeeping, please note that this session is being recorded. If you are not able to join throughout, we would also share you the recorded link so you can follow up in listening afterwards. Keep your mic mute, and if you need to ask any question, please just drop them in the Q&A section on the Zoom. I would be the one taking them each one after the other. So please, thank you very much once again for joining us, and we look forward to an engaging session. Thank you. Over to you, Yinka.
Thank you so much, Ola. So as Ola said, please use the Q&A functions to ask any of your questions. We have about an hour time for this. But please remember, this is an interactive session. It's going to be very informal. We're having a discussion round. We want to get together, really dig into the subject matter and engage. So today with us, we have Rotimi Williams, the founder of Kerrickson Farm, but also Resident 4.0, and Ronke Eko Adewin Oye, of AgriHub Nigeria. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves briefly before we go into the subject matter of the business of sustainable agriculture. Ronke, if you could show yourself and tell us a bit about what you've done, in particular about your experience as a farm ashore within the GAP, the global GAP, but also with your engagement in AgriHub. Over to you, Ronke.
Okay, good morning, everyone. It's good to have you here. So basically, my name is Ronke Ademiye, and founder of AgriHub Nigeria, and predominantly I've worked with smallholder farmers to help them develop standards to supply premium markets. So when we talk about premium markets, because what premium markets usually need is a consistent supply of quality. Sometimes premium markets are local, sometimes premium markets are international, but it's been a journey working with quite a number of them, especially along the vegetable and now along the grains and tuber value chain. So aside from working in with smallholder farmers to supply premium markets and in building clusters, I also do a bit of processing and manufacturing, and also working with processors and manufacturers to help them set up efficiently and produce effectively. So yeah, I think those are the main things I've done. Main high points, working to build farming clusters, to supply premium markets, working with value chain actors to ensure that parts of certain value chains are not broken, so that everyone can get optimum value along the value chain, basically.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And Rotimi, for those of you who have been steady supporters of our activities, you would have come across Rotimi already, and you know quite a bit about his background because he's joined us a few times, but I would still want you, Rotimi, to please say a few words about what you have done, both as a farmer within Carrickstock Farms, but also Resolute 4.0. Please don't dig too deeply into Resolute 4.0 because it's basically our subject matter for today. But over to you, Rotimi.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Rotimi Williams, and I'm a farmer. I don't know if to say I'm still a farmer, but for the year, we'll talk about that later. But yeah, so I farm in Nasarawa and in Plateau State. I've been doing that since 2012. And well, it's been great. I focus primarily on production of paddy, which is the raw material. I don't process rice. So I typically sell paddy to the processors, so that's to the millers. And that's been the business model that we run for all those years. And now we're faced with the security challenge, and that led to the creation of Resolute 4.0, which Yinka said we'll discuss later. So I better drop that topic there. However, what I'm working on now is creating the Young Rice Farmers Association of Nigeria to try and sort of reorganize the sector, because I think the current associations and the government have not done a great job of understanding and addressing the issues. And I believe that with the experience over the years and with the right people on board as well, we can begin to channel the young minds and those who are new to the rice industry in the right direction, kind of putting them through and making it sustainable for them and opening the doors. So instead of me farming, why not teach other people how to do it while I take the time off? So that's the focus now.
Thank you so much. Awesome. So let's dig right into the subject matter of today. So we're looking at the business of sustainable agriculture, which obviously has at its punchline sustainability. When you hear the word sustainability and agriculture, what are the first couple of things that come to your mind? That's to either of you, Ronke or Rotimi. How do you understand sustainability in agriculture? I mean, sustainability in terms of renewable energy sources, energy, or in terms of climate change, understanding the fact that the world is getting warmer and that farming practices perhaps have to be a bit more climate neutral or sensitive. Talk about smart agriculture, also the use of technology, the use of data. There's so many things that come to mind when you hear sustainability and agriculture. So just off the top of your head, how do you understand the subject matter of sustainability and agriculture? What are the first couple of things that come to mind? And maybe that's a question that participants can also answer using the chat function. What is your understanding of sustainability and agriculture?
So for me, sustainability encompasses everything. So how do we continue to produce food in a way that we continue to have farmers on the farm producing, in a way that food is affordable, in a way that's available, in a way that is safe now and for the generations unborn? How do we ensure that we don't wipe out a whole variety or group of foods without, but with the practices we currently have now? So the sustainability is encompassing. So how do we ensure farmers are safe and they can stay on the farms? How do we ensure that inputs are available and they're safe so that productivity can increase per acre and farmers don't keep on committing suicide because they're running their farms at a loss? Do you understand? So how do we ensure that climate change is not affecting how farmers produce? So it's a very broad topic to discuss. So it's just a function of everyone picking their part of the sustainability story and building solutions around it, because everything contributes to the sustainability of food production.
Great. Rotimi, what are your thoughts on sustainability?
Okay, I think Ronke pretty much wrapped up. She's pretty much wrapped up everything there. But my thoughts on sustainability is, look, it's very simple, and I don't think we should complicate this. The matter is, look, for the people that produce the bulk of your food, what would they require to be able to do that season by season, year after year? All those factors that need to come together to ensure that this happens is what I call sustainability. If you look at insecurity or security issues, for example, like Ronke rightly said, look at the inputs, affordability as well, financing, insurance, the climate. Like now, I mean, it started raining in April, it stopped. We don't know when it's going to start again. The farmers don't have knowledge of this. And for those who are supposed to be harvesting at the end of this month, if the rain comes, then they are faced with a different issue. So how do you get this information to them using technology? So these are all little aspects of sustainability that come together that form a bigger picture, which then informs whether a farmer will be productive or not. So it's, and like Ronke earlier mentioned, it's just those little bits that need to be picked up and developed, and I think that here we've not done a great job at that. If you look at the dissemination of information on things like weather, for example, it's almost impossible to know if it's going to rain that day or not. So you stand on the farm waiting to apply inputs and praying for rain, and then the rain doesn't come, and then the rain doesn't come for 3 weeks, and you're there trying to put fungicide on your crop. So you need to be able to take those decisions. And imagine if we are saying this, we have access to technology. The people in the rural area may not have the same access that we do. So for me, in that manner, sustainability it sort of covers all those issues.
Okay, thank you so much. The International Food Policy Research Institute, in its paper about Nigerian sustainable agriculture, made a statement. I'm just going to read it out really briefly, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. There is a lack of data sets to analyze food security and nutrition in Nigeria. It is important to design interventions that actually work. So a focus on a lack of data and interventions that do not exist to meet existing demands. What are your thoughts on the use of data and particularly technology to address some of the food security issues broadly?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll just use an example to answer this question. About 4 or 5 years ago, and I know Ronke is aware of this, I ran a company called Competence, where basically we gathered information from all the markets, all 4 major markets in Lagos, collecting the source of the product, information on the source of the product, the variety of the product, the prices, if there's a price variance, what's causing it, all those things. And over the 4 years, we were able to tell where food was coming from, what was influencing the prices, and then being able to also feed information back to the farmer on what is required, where it's required, and when it's required. That sort of information, at the point where we started, we struggled to get people that needed it. That's the problem, right? But now that the need has come. There's nobody doing it. So I do agree that there's
Mm-hmm.
definitely a lack of data, and for us to progress and be able to effectively utilize the scarce resources that we have, we require data to be able to do that properly.
Okay. What I would also like to add to it is that as a country, we are used to just making decisions based on emotions or based on sentiments or based on religious sentiments, basically. So we don't make decisions even pertaining to the people that the decisions are affected based on hardcore information that we receive. So a lot of times you just realize that you are not even having people collecting and saving data, because data collection improves with time. As you collect data and you utilize it, you begin to realize what type of data you need again to improve the previous data that was collected. So if you are not using it, you can't even know that what you're collecting is not efficient and you need to collect more data efficiently and how to utilize it. So there's that culture of not using data and just pulling figures in the air to make decisions. So even for educated farmers, you hear people say, oh, I want to supply tomatoes to Lagos market. But you ask them, what is the tomato demand for Lagos market? How do you plan? What size of the market do you want to corner? How do you plan your production towards that? How do you know that your location is going to be efficient to meet your production targets? People don't know they need to plan around those type of data. You don't just get up and say you want to set up a farm or you want to set up a mill to start milling rice, maybe in Ogun State. And you're wondering, so what is the production capacity of Ogun State for rice? What size of mill do you need in Ogun State? People don't use that data to make those decisions. So I think aside from the fact that the reason it's almost like the chicken and the egg, do you start collecting data for people that don't even know how to use the data and appropriate the information from the data? Or do you wait for people that know how to use the data before you start collecting data? So that's the problem, because data collection is also very expensive. It's not cheap. And then the second part is that there's also actually a lot of scattered data everywhere. It's not, so there are days I've had interactions with certain people, especially with development agencies that have worked across certain value chains. And you'll be shocked at the amount of data they have for certain products in certain places. But it's just like this is not openly available. So it's like everybody seems to have worked in silos, and the data is now just data. It's not crystallizing into information that can be used to carry out actionable projects or stuff, because person A or agency A has part A of the data, agency B works on maybe just part B of that value chain, agency C works on part D, and they are not talking to each other, basically. So you have data everywhere scattered and not particularly useful at the end of the day. So it's a complex issue, really, at the end of the day. How to deal with it, I'm not 100% sure, but it's just the chicken and the egg. Do we start collecting data for the sake of collecting data, or do you find the people that understand the value of this data before collecting this data?
Yeah, that's a very important point. And one of our participants, I'm just going to read out Sahid Adams' comment. The data, when collected, are also disaggregated. A centralized or seemingly organized data will be appropriate, which is essentially what Ronke is just saying as well. Sorry, Rotimi, you were going to say something as well.
Yeah, I was just going to add, just to make it a bit more practical. So I remember then when we're collecting data, and I think I did share this information with the Southwest governors and the Southwest Agric commissioners then. Things like pineapple, we found out through our research that 80% of the pineapple consumed in Lagos came from Benin Republic, while you have Edo that should be producing a lot of pineapples rather. So it was pineapples, right? While you have Edo that should be producing the pineapples, but they were coming from Benin Republic. In the off season, we realized that tomatoes were coming from both Ghana and Cameroon. So not the Kaduna Zaria that people assume. And we looked at things like beans, for example. Almost 100% of beans was coming from Borno. And with insurgency, we knew that that supply will obviously at some point thin out. And with all this information, You can then build industry, right? You can also mitigate issues like the beans issue, for example. But then this information was available. We shared it with the army, we shared it with the Ministry of Agriculture. Nothing was done. Nothing was done, and it's not encouraging. So you spend money collecting data, you're almost giving out the data for free, and yet it's not even being used. And what's the point collecting data? And data is expensive, and it takes a long period for your data set to start making sense. Who's going to fund it? You know, we did this for 4 years, Monday to Friday, going to the market. You understand? Every day. It's not cheap. You understand? So I'm building a platform as well for that. Do you understand? So there has to be that encouragement for data to be collected, and there has to be evidence that the data is actually going to be used. Otherwise, there's really no point.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to read out a comment by Motsuraya. Hey, Aya. So how can data be available in a manner that is affordable for the educated farmer? And how can we educate the uneducated farmers to implement the use of data to their own benefits? Rotimi, what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so I think that this part of our exercise then was we also tried to look for farmers who are going to make use of this data. And we realized very quickly that people really just want things for free. And people assume that by going to the market and just asking questions was enough information that they require to carry out their business. Nobody really wants to pay for that data. And even if you want to break the data down to the rural area, you understand, how you then do it and obviously then make a business out of it also becomes a bit tricky, because how will you push information? I remember there's a Novus Agro or something was doing this. You subscribe by text and they'll send you the information. I don't even know if they still do it anymore, because by the time people get week 1, week 2, week 3 information, they assume that the 3-week information and take it for the entire year, and that's it. So then again, cashing out on that was the main problem. It's not making the information trickling from the top to the bottom is not really the problem. It's the process of it doing so, the cost of it. Who bears the cost? And how does the data company make money? If it's going to be a government thing, let it be a government thing. But then will you really trust information coming from the government, seeing how they carry out most of this research? Those are the problems.
Okay, thank you so much for...
And another thing, because of how expensive data is, I think another thing that is also missing in many of the policies or actions of government is also dissemination of data. It's missing because, you know, I say a lot of times, capital flows into areas and sectors where there's inadequate data to make business decisions. So you find people in the oil and gas sector, you find people in the finance and fintech, because there's hard data, especially a lot of intellectuals, because there's hard data to make non-sentimental business decisions. But for the Agric sector, you don't have hard data to pull that type of flow of people or investment, because everything is just here and there. So one of the things governments, in as much as I hate to always mention governments to do certain things, but it's important because data is very expensive. And it's one of the things they should actually focus on, spending a part of their budget on disseminating data in a way that the private sector can begin to make sense of it. And maybe it's something even maybe the development agencies that have worked on it can also do, so that people can begin to see where all this disaggregated data is and bring it together, basically. So I think because it's not easy for one farmer to say they want to access all the data and make a decision. It's too expensive. It doesn't make sense. But there needs to be access to that data for people to be able to look into, extrapolate, interpret, and make decisions at the end of the day. Educating farmers, to answer Turayo's question, and it all boils down to educating farmers. That's where extension, interactions, information sessions like this come into play. How do we begin to educate people to know that, you know, first and foremost, the world of agriculture is not agribusiness, and it's about understanding the numbers, the figures, how everything interacts and how it works. Do you understand? So, and I think also the financial institutions can also play a role, because if you are able to make certain types of data available to potential clients, maybe it's easier to fund certain type of projects, certain type of value chains. Do you understand? So for example, when you say a bank is financing the rice value chain, maybe through the Anchor Borrowers program, it should make available data about the rice value chain. Do you understand? So that more people going into that sector can have a better understanding of what they're investing in. It should not be shrouded in so much secrecy. Do you understand? So how would 5 billion in rice, how does it translate to in rice farming? How does it translate to things? How does it break down into inputs, into production, where's the production, who are the farmers, and all that? So it needs to be like a intentional, concerted effort by everybody to make it work. It can't just, because the truth is, in this country, we can't just say we are depending on government, but everybody needs to be interested in making this data available and educating as many people as possible in a way to ensure that there are synergies that form, and over time, the data cannot begin to make sense to everybody.
Okay, thank you. I want to make reference to one of your articles, Rotary, from June 2020 now. It was titled "Using Data in Nigeria to Reduce Violence and Build Food Security." So again, we're focusing very heavily again on data and insecurity and food security. I'm going to read a very short paragraph, and I just want you to talk us through your thinking here and also directly tap into Resolute 4.0 now. So farming should be safe, but in Nigeria, it can be deadly. All we want to do is protect our land so that we can grow the crops our families need and our country requires. Then you make reference to the middle belt and say that it has some of Africa's richest farmlands, but it lacks infrastructure, investment, and systems of production. It really comes down to a quarrel over access to limited resources of land. And then you talk a little bit about climate change. So just this short excerpt about farming and insecurity in Nigeria, but also how that directly impacts upon food security. Can you just talk us through this article a bit?
Okay, I think I'm trying to remember what article that was exactly, but so the point I was trying to make there is that, look, if you look at these farmer header issues that have been going on in Nigeria, right? You talk of them, people talk about desertification of the northern part of Nigeria and how it's becoming more arid. So basically, most of the cattle are moving southwards to graze. Obviously, then there's more competition for land because it coincides with the same period where the government is also pushing more people onto the farms to produce food. So yeah, and then land itself is a fixed scarce resource, right? You can't expand on that. So the two are beginning to clash. Let's set aside all the religious and other issues. Let's just focus on the pure farmer header issue here. So the point I was trying to make there was that, look, if you look at climate change and how that is affecting agriculture by creating conflict over scarce resources between both the farmer and the header, who actually are both key players in the agric sector, by the way. One produces beef, the other one just does the grains and the vegetables, right? And the two are loggerheads, and there's a big problem. And then now what we'll find is that in a lot of these communities, the conflict has sort of snowballed, and a lot of farmers are not able to go to their farms anymore. I'm certainly not farming this year because of insecurity. And I don't know about Ronke. I remember Ronke saying she's not farming either. And what was interesting was that last week we sat on a round table with a few other colleagues that are into farming, and every single person there had their concerns, and bottom line was nobody's farming this year. The other person wants to expand his business, is not expanding his business anymore. And it hit me at that point that we've reached a critical point where most of the private, what we call them, private sector individuals or corporates and young people who are looking to stick their neck out and get involved in the agribusiness are actually now taking a backseat. That for me is a huge discouragement, and it cannot be good news for Nigeria, especially if you understand that for most of the rural people that farm and produce food in the rural area, we who go there to farm are actually the ones who provide the funding, or the link between the urban and the rural area, not just the food that they sell. We bring in the necessary capital for them to produce the food, which ends up in the market. So if we are not doing it, then who will? Right. Last year, while farming, a lot of my staff were able to buy the fertilizer they needed through the daily wage they received. right? So now think about that, fast forward this season, that's not going to happen. Who's going to provide them with those funds? Do you understand? And all of that, if you add it up together, if you look at holistically, it has a negative effect on food supply. You know, and this is sort of what we're talking about. And in other areas where insecurity is rampant, right, what we've also found is that most of the farmers have abandoned their bigger farms, right, in the bush because of insecurity or fear of being kidnapped or killed. And they're moving to smaller plots next to their homes, right? And that again, for me, you know, it's less food coming out of the rural area, of which, by the way, the rural area produces 80% of the locally produced food that we consume in the markets, that we find in the market, that we buy. If you think about it, all the rice, millet, beans, everything, it's all produced in the rural area. These are the same people we're talking about. So if these people are having issues, if there are issues in the rural area, then there's a direct linkage and effect on our food supply. And the less food in the market, the more expensive it gets. And we're already seeing that happen in the urban, in the likes of Lagos and Abuja, that demand a lot more food. And they, by any measure, actually control the prices of food, because the more pull effect they have to those areas, right, the more we have to pay to attract that same commodity in this direction. So that's sort of the linkage between the crisis and food supply.
Thank you so much. I want us to talk a little bit about climate change. You have made reference to climate change and how it directly impacts what is going on, the farmer herder issue. What potential solutions do you see here?
That's a tough question. I don't know, actually. If I tell you I knew, I'll be lying, because last year we produced rice. Rice is a 4-month crop, right? And in August, we had 3.5 weeks of no rain. No rain. It's never happened before, right? And then what then happened in the whole area where I was farming was that rice blast is a disease. The rice blast disease became rampant because they thrive in areas where there's nitrogen and no water, right? Even if you want to spray and deal with that, you still need water. So you still need rain before you can spray. So we couldn't spray. So a lot of farmers watched their crop die. I was able to pump water. I had to improvise, and basically rainy season became wet season. We needed to irrigate during the rainy season, you see. So how we deal with those issues, I don't know. If there's some sort of information we can get as to when to plant, and if I told you I knew, I'll be lying. The only plans we have is when we do decide to go back on the farm, both rainy season and dry season will be treated as dry season. We're going to have to irrigate all through. We're not taking chances anymore by waiting for rain. You see, and what that will also have, what then that means also is that, you know, the predicted cattle movements, because they graze on the same land we farm on, also changes, which means that if it's dry season for a longer period, that means the period when we want to farm, they're also in the same place. So it creates those challenges, right? So maybe Ronke has a better answer for the issues on climate change, because I've wrapped my head around it, except we can make rain. I don't know how.
I mean, irrigation as a solution.
Well,
irrigation definitely comes as a solution, but for private sector individuals like us, it's much easier. I know the government had tried it before. How do you create smaller irrigation pumps that are affordable, but yet efficient and effective for the rural area? We have not seen that happen. We've seen a lot of low-end China products end up in the market here that don't last any more than a season. Do you understand? And then a lot of these farmers are indebted because of this issue. So how do you provide that to them at an affordable price? You see, that's
I mean, water management and irrigation is one of the topics that we will be addressing in a later breakfast series. And we'll talk about it a bit more there, but I feel like there are quite a few innovative solutions that make sense for the African market, but we'll dig deeper in a later session. Sorry, Ronke, you were going to say something?
Yes. So what I wanted to say is it's almost like the data issue. It has to be a holistic approach to finding a solution, because like Rotimi said, as it happened in the north, it also happened down south. I think they had 5 weeks in the north. We had close to 7 weeks in the south in the middle of the rainy season. So farmers were literally watching their harvest, their farms die, and having nothing to do about it, because the dry spell came in the middle of the rainy season, not before, not after, like in the middle of the rainy season. But what I wanted to say is that one of the major things we need to begin to look at, and I'll mention governments, I'll mention private sector development agencies, is a reorientation about how the agribusiness sector, how farms should be worked and run. There also needs to be an improved approach to financing the agricultural value chain. It's not enough to just say we're giving farmers money for seed and fertilizer. We need to begin to develop systems that finances incorporating water solutions, irrigation solutions that can cover larger portions of land. We have quite a number of dams that are not in use and in Nigeria. What can we do to begin to harness this to ensure water is available to fight the irrigation problems? So how do we begin to create financing solutions? Because most financial products fund farmers for a season. If I'm going to invest in irrigation, I can't pay over a season. I will need to pay over a year or 2 or 3 years, sometimes depending on your location. Especially, so like, for example, putting in a borehole in Ogun State may cost as much as 2 million naira. Doing the same thing in Sokoto maybe, I don't know, I'm not sure. But so there's a need to begin to look at these things. How do we finance, or how do we begin to help smallholder farmers or larger farmers, or how do we begin to get private sector to even provide irrigation as a service to farmers? Do you understand? Just like you have private sector providing power as a service, as IPPs. Is there a way to provide irrigation as a service? Because it's not even enough to buy the irrigation drip sets or the pivot systems or these spray tubes. Is where do we access the water or power these systems to ensure that the farms have these things? That's where also another part of the challenge is, because people get creative in getting the water on the farm, but how do we even get the water to a point that is even available to even utilize at a cost that makes sense? Another thing that needs to be looked at is agricultural practices need to be modified to adapt to climate change. People are doing the same things and the temperature of their location has significantly increased. So inevitably the efficiency of their production has dropped. But again, because we are not collecting data, nobody can say, oh, I noticed last year it was 2 tons and this year it is now 1.5 tons and it is reducing drastically, because it also boils down to data again. So people's productivity per acre, it was poor before as a country, but it's not getting worse. So you see people spending more on their farms, but getting less out of it. How do we begin to reverse this? Do you understand? Those are the things that need to be, I'm not sure who needs to now work on it, whether it's we need to engage research institutes more, or we need to engage government more. But and that's also where the failing extension services also need to be put in place, because extension services were supposed to be the way to cascade up-to-date information to farmers. But now we literally don't have an existing extension service system in Nigeria, literally. So, and research is not being done per what is needed per time in each location. So ideally, if I was in Ogun State and there was a University of Agriculture in Ogun State, they should be researching on how all these various factors affect my production and how I can improve it. And then the extension agents cascade this information from the research institutes to the farmers on the field in a language they understand, in order to ensure that their productivity is up. So that chain is broken, literally. There's no connection between research, between extension. There's no even extension to connect to farmers. So everybody's just scattered.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to read out.
Yeah, so those are the things, basically. So it's not a one, I don't think it's something that one person can find a solution to, but we all just need to come together and say we need to figure out how to fix this.
Yeah. I'm going to read out a question from one of our participants, Temitope Banjo. He says that there are 17 dams in Nigeria. Why are we not using them? Why spend money on irrigation facilities? What are your thoughts on that, about the use of dams?
We actually have more than 17 dams in Nigeria. We have close to 23 in Kaduna. We have about 22 in Oyo State. Ogun State has some as well. So there are a lot of dams in Nigeria. I have visited one or two before, and I didn't even believe I was in Nigeria when I was there. It was well built, and it could do a lot. But it still boils down to how we have a lot of infrastructure going to waste in Nigeria. Some of these projects were thought out well, but the execution was poor. Do you understand? And it also boils down to access to data. How many people even know we have these dams? How do we harness these dams to begin to mitigate this? That's one. And then there's also the part of, dams are in certain locations. It doesn't mean they're across all locations. So some farmers may not have direct access to these dams. Some may. Do you understand? So it's a function of those that even have access to the dam, how do you make sure that they can now utilize it? Do you understand? And those that don't, how do we make sure that they're able to apply climate smart solutions to them? So yeah, there's literally nothing we can do about the dams now except to begin to pressurize government to make it available for private sector to use. There have been attempts to privatize the dams in Oyo State. Not necessarily privatized, but sort of concession to make it available for people to use. And because of the way the dams are set up, people are also wary of farming around the dams because most of those places are located to government. So you don't want to go and start something expecting that government will be on your side, and some years down the line, you just realize that government kicks you out. Do you understand? So those are the major issues. Really, it's about how do you make this information available? Let your intentions as a government, state, federal, whatever, be clear to the people, and they can plug into it and now say, okay, this is what we want to do, and be less reduce the somersault in policies. So today you say the dam is available for all. Today you say it's not available. It has a concession to the private sector and all that. So those are the various things really at the end of the day. So we have actually more than 17 dams, very beautiful dams, but it's the way it is.
Thank you. There's a comment that came in from Tonya Smart, saying that we need Agric platforms or apps with Agric information. This directly links back to something that I wanted us to talk about, which is Resolute 4.0, which Rotimi built. So could you just talk us through what informed your decision to build that app and its functionality?
Okay, so Resolute 4.0 was built to address the insecurity in rural areas, majorly communal conflict and farmer header issues. And I mean, I think part of what informed that was it just didn't sit easy anymore, knowing that hundreds and thousands of people were being killed in the rural area, and we felt that nothing was being done about it. And about 100% of these people that killed are farmers anyway. So that led to the creation of Resolute. And what it basically is just a panic alert early warning system that has a map your farm function, a view your farm function, and a marketplace function. And we've been in operation. I mean, we started a pilot 2 years ago in Plateau State. And I believe that it's done, well, it's proven to be effective. I can't go into too much detail because it's not pleasant at all. What we've seen there, but we've been able to share information with the army in terms of location, and also the data we pull from there in terms of time of attack, the frequency of attack, the location of attack, the style of attack, and that sort of data has been used by the army to use their men or effectively put their men in certain areas to be able to mitigate any reprisals or anything. So I think in that respect, it's been very useful. I'm not sure if that was the sort of technology Tonya was talking about. I believe she might be referring more to something along the lines of educational tools for agriculture. With respect to that, I mean, similar to data, like data as well. I mean, how much information can you pack into an app? That's a real question. If I create an app now for rice farming, how many rice farmers are really interested in using the app? So how then do I make money? If one develops an app for vegetable farmers, do you understand, already have access to Google and the likes, then, how does she make money? What's the encouragement for this? Except it's something very specific and you're addressing a specific problem. Do you understand? I believe there's already enough agri-tech solutions out there already. I think it just needs to be well publicized. I think more people need to be aware of what is already available to be used. But in terms of Resolute, so that was the reason Resolute was created, and we're looking at expanding across the country now as well, just in a bit to at least, improve the security level. We know we can't solve the problem, right? But if we can contribute to the solution, then by all means, we're going to try. And that's what we're trying to achieve.
In one of your statements, you said that as we've released Resolute 4.0, we've hardly wiped out the violence, but I'm convinced that we've saved lives. You said you can't go into too much detail, but I'm curious to know how local farmers received this app. How was it easy for them to understand the use of app? I believe that you need a smartphone. Do they have access to smartphones? How easy is it to use Resolute 4.0, and how was it received by farmers in that region? And how do you intend approaching farmers in other locations with that app?
Okay, I think for us, what we did was we assumed that they didn't have smartphones. So we bought the low-end smartphones. We pre-installed the app on them, and then we did an onboarding, so like a mini launch in the community where we just invited the people who wanted to give the phones to. And within 5 minutes, they were using the app. It's a simple app. It's just 4 buttons, 4 keys, but color-coded. And red is danger, right? Yellow is marketplace. Green is map your farm. Blue is view your farm. So for those who cannot read, can just follow the color code. And once you press the panic alert, you'll see the panic alert sent to Resolute 4.0. Immediately we get the alert, and the army also gets the alert. So it's pretty easy technology. In fact, you'd be very shocked. The minute we give out the phones, these people they started following me on Facebook. Some of them I started seeing their comments on Twitter. So they learn quickly when it comes to technology. You see people who cannot read, who can call out their number for you to dial them, or they can search for your name on their phone. Do you understand? So it's pretty easy technology that we're able to put out. And since we started 2 years ago, we've now received about 220 panic alerts. Quite a number of people have been killed. Resolute we also pay the hospital bills of the victims. We also share information with the hospital. So the hospital, if there's someone who's injured, and we get that information first, that say someone is being shot, we get in touch with the hospital to let them know that there's a victim coming in. So like a 911 service for the rural area. We give information on the kind of injury, just so that the hospital has time to prepare, and they're not wasting valuable time when the patient arrives. So we do all of that as well. But the key function of Resolute is to bridge the communication gap between security agencies and those communities, those vulnerable communities, and all in a bid, to address food security, economic development, and national security.
Okay, awesome work. I'm going to read out a comment by another participant, Yewande Olatunde. Over the years or months, what has been the role of farmer associations? I noticed that here in the North, artificial or solar powering irrigation is big. I don't want to read too much. Let's deal with the first part of the question. What has been the role of farmer associations?
I think before, I'll start on this one. So I think farmer associations have become very political. That's why I said earlier that we're creating the Young Rice Farmers Association of Nigeria. Even to get that name, in order to create that association, was a struggle, because the existing association put up a fight. Why would you put up a fight if another association is coming not to compete with you, but to add value, right? And all we're trying to do is, look, we want to create an association that does what associations do, which is advocate for their people and pass down knowledge to their members. And do you understand? And then also influence policy, and then take that same policy and break it down back to where it's required. Unlike the current associations who just lobby, they get funds, and they've gotten how many billions, hundreds of billions over the years, and we haven't seen the price of rice change. It hasn't come down, if anything. Do you see? And for me, effectiveness of any policy right? Especially if you're pumping a lot of money called intervention money into there. The only way you know it's successful is if you see the price in the market actually drop, right? And that's not happening. So the current associations, as far as I'm concerned, they're more political than Agric associations. And I just think that we as young people, we need to stand up, create a platform for us to have a voice, and then keep pushing forward.
Okay, thank you for your input. Ronke, what are your thoughts on farm associations?
No, there's no need to be. He has said most of it. They are primarily, most of them are political associations, basically, and primarily just to access certain types of funding, and not to actually improve the livelihoods of the farmers that are affected by their direct or indirect association with the association at the end of the day. So I think it's also one of the problems. So we need to begin to have new generation associations form so that we can have things done better. Maybe the associations can take on the role of getting data across to farmer members, and all those many things. How maybe they can take on the role of, how do you advocate for climate smart solutions for farmers? Maybe those are the things that the associations can begin to do from bottom up. But for now, the associations that currently exist don't have that as part of their agenda, basically. It's more political than apolitical.
A quick question, Rotary, because that's something I remember we spoke about a couple of weeks ago about the opportunities, I want to hear your thoughts on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and the opportunities that it brings, because at the moment you said you are not farming in Nigeria. Do you see opportunities here? Or what opportunities do you potentially see?
With the FCT, so, well, it's for me, it's unfortunate, but it creates the greatest exit plan, right? And we cracked this joke last week. So I'm not saying exiting the market, but I'm just saying producing a more conducive environment and sell to the same market. Why not? So if I'm allowed to produce in Benin Republic where there's no competition for the land, there's no fear of being killed or kidnapped, there's access to funding, there's labor willing to work, and there's a road network to a large market like Lagos. Why then will I stay and be producing here and dodging bullets when I can produce in Benin Republic and sell in Nigeria, right? Same for Cote d'Ivoire. I just received an email, I think it was yesterday or the day before, inviting me to start farming rice in Cote d'Ivoire. I have the same proposal from Benin Republic, from Gambia as well. So there's a lot of opportunity that unfortunately has come forward as a result of this. But in as much as I make light or joke of it, it's actually not funny, because what Nigeria then is doing is exporting, it's forcing the young people who are actually willing to work and contribute, right, to be innovative in contributing elsewhere and selling and then benefiting from the same market. It really doesn't help us. Nigeria, I don't see what we're going to be exporting to these other countries. We import mostly from them. So that agreement benefits them more than it benefits us. We don't have the right infrastructure in place. Insecurity is rampant. So even production is going to be hampered, how then do you compete? That's the real question. So for those in the Lagos market, or for those farmers who supply and rely on selling the Lagos markets, now by the end of this year, we have a lot to think about, because we need to compete with other farmers and other markets that are outside Nigeria who are able to push their excess produce in this market for as little as a penny. How do you compete with people like this? So that, for me, I don't think was thought through well enough in protecting the local farmers. If you look at the borders were closed for a couple of years or thereabouts, and then you decide to open the border at harvest time for your rainy season of rice. I mean, who does that? So obviously you're going to crash the price. And then you expect farmers who you've given money, by the way, who are supposed to pay you back, right, to sell at a loss and be able to still pay you back and make enough money to go farm again in the next season. It's not going to work. So we're not thinking as one. The government isn't really thinking. And if we can't even get it right internally, by the time you open the borders, then how are you going to get it right? How are we going to export rice? We can't export rice anymore. We can't export hardly anything we can export out of Nigeria at this present point, because everything we produce here will need to be consumed here at some point, the way things are going. It's impossible. If you go shopping now, your disposable income is shrinking more and more because of the rising cost of food in the market, you see, and that's the reflection of what is also going on in your production line.
Mm-hmm. Because you mentioned the production line, we have a comment by Sahid Adams saying that sustainability around production processes is also important. Soil fertility is pivotal to mitigating impacts or effects of climate change. So looking at soil fertility, what are your thoughts here?
Well, you know, so let me just quickly pinch on it. So when people talk about soil fertility, for me, for me, those are just, how will I put this without sounding funny? Those are not the important things, right? The soil has two functions. It holds the plant in place and it provides nutrients to them, right? You can do the same thing. That's what hydroponics is doing. If you have the plastic to hold the plant in place and then you supply the nutrients through the water, it's the same thing. And any soil you plant on anyway will deplete in terms of fertility, in terms of resources, right? Over time, so you need to fertilize, either using bio or non-bio, or whatever, however you want to go about it, right? That's not the important question when it comes to sustainability, because you always need to put it, except you're looking at things like cattle, you know, cattle for manure, for fertilizing the land, as the locals would like to say. But that poses its own issues as well, because you don't know what the N is with nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium, what quantities in the ground. At that point, you're not going to do your soil test every season before you plant. Do you understand? So that for me is not really the issue here. I think that will come to light later. That's issues for more advanced conversation when we've gone beyond the infrastructure and the insecurity challenges that we're faced with now. Then we can begin to look at zone by zone, local government by local government, the soil profile of these places and how we can utilize it effectively. I have an issue with the way government is doing it presently by giving everybody 2 bags of fertilizer and expecting all of us to give you the same number of yields. It's not going to work because our soil is not the same. However, before we even get to that, there are bigger issues that need to be dealt with. It's no longer about where it's good for me to farm. It's not about where it's safe for me to farm, and I'll make that place good. That's what we're operating now in Nigeria.
That was a nice, difficult, but yeah, very poignant summary. Ronka, I'll let you make a final statement before we'll invite Ola for 1 or 2 questions from the audience.
Okay, so I just wanted to, because, you know, when Rotimi was speaking about the opportunities for after, it made it sound like as if, you know, everybody should just run out of Nigeria to produce. But what I think can be done as well with the opportunities that also presents for us is it also increases access to certain raw materials for manufacturing. So if the likes of Rotimi moves to Gambia and Benin and Cote d'Ivoire, and I set up my mill, for example, in Lagos or Ogun State, it also means that in as much if the production of that is increasing at that point there's also alternative source of bringing this in, because based on what he said, his production per capita is lower, and, you know, it might be able to feed my mill and it's not going to. But aside from the mill, across manufacturing, because, you know, a lot of the manufacturing locations can be located in more secure locations. Do you understand? To convert these raw materials into something that can be consumed. Secondly, but what we will see happening more is people tending to fall on the latter part of the value chains, how it gets to retail consumers, how it is packaged, how it is processed. While it just means that we need to double up on value additions of bringing things in, as against the huge focus we've had so far on primary production, while we solve the insecurity issues. Because I don't see primary production going up rapidly anytime soon. The amount of farmers that have left the farm is significantly too high for us to get back rapidly to normal. But, you know, we have to pull these people that are moving from there to other areas. So we have the manufacturing, processing, logistics, because now there'll be more room for logistics across the states, across the countries. There'll be more room for trade. There'll be more room for all these things. So there's a need to begin to look at all that and, you know, make it work, basically.
Great. Thank you so much. Ola, over to you. What questions do we have from the audience that we haven't touched upon at all? There are a few questions on water management and irrigation. I think we can park those since it's a topic that we will be treating in June. But what other questions do we have for our speakers?
So there's a question to Rotimi from Babatunde. It says, how has the dependency on data for effective agribusiness changed over the years? What has been your experience?
So could you take that again? So I didn't.
How has the dependency on data for effective agribusiness changed over the years from your experience?
Well, to answer that question, I think part of what was discussed earlier was that, earlier in the years we were collecting this data, but in terms of making a business out of it and utilizing that data effectively, it's been quite difficult. So for me, a dependency on data is basically meaning creating your own data and utilizing it, because it's just not available. What is available in the market by the government is not reliable information. So that for me has been the issue with data.
I think you can also just touch on this one from Richard Agetu. He says he's of the opinion that we need to leapfrog beyond discussing irrigation and maybe talk about water governance. And to Ronke, what do you think are the necessary drivers for water governance discussion in agri sector?
Water governance.
Yeah.
The thing is, I'll just want to say, the thing about it is, we even have to start from even the basics, like Rotimi had said previously, before we even get to water, because water is a huge cause of dispute as well in communities. Where there's water, there's usually a lot of disputes because the pressure on the water is much. Do you understand? And we don't really harvest water in Nigeria. We don't believe in water harvesting. So it's a hydra-headed issue, because, like, for example, on my farm, there's a stream that passes by, and there was conflict as to who had the rights to be able to utilize the water. Was it the community? Was it the local government, state government, and federal government? We had to now begin to dig up the policies around water and the water resources, natural water resources, and who has jurisdiction over what. And what we found was that there were so many overlapping policies or items in the various policies that were unanswered. So it was almost like, if you had to go that route, you have to deal with every single one of them to even find a solution to doing what you wanted to do as a private person. So those are like foundation issues. It's almost like the same issues you have with land acquisition sometimes. In some places, it's not clear. You find you are dealing with the community, the local government, the state government, to even have a very security about that particular portion of land. So it boils down to, like we said, there's a need to begin to engage on policies, on development of these things and how it affects farmers at the end of the day. So I don't know where or how we'll start that, but the question is, are there even farmers now in the field willing to even go and use the water if it's not safe? We all need to even be safe first before we now start dealing with water. Because I know how many times I don't even have cattle herder issues on my farm, but I've had issues of conflict over water. Do you understand? Because you have those that, what we call abuleshowo guys, they're the ones that dig the stream for sand, for construction and building, the sand they get from the water. They're the guys, so that same stream, those guys want the soil, the sand there for construction and building. The same stream, the guys in the community want the water for fish. The same stream, I want it for irrigation. Do you understand? So everybody's activity affects the other person. So there's constantly that conflict around who has the right to demand for access to that water. And so those are issues, and that is not even on a very large scale, basically. So those are issues that are constantly there. And that's why I was saying there's even a need to even start with how do you deal with access to water before we now even begin to pump and irrigate and all that, especially in locations where those things are not clear. But unfortunately, in the scheme of things across board in the agricultural value chain, water is not one of the issues. Everybody's talking about fertilizer, so so we need to even go past the first stage of dealing with all those issues before we even get to water, like also getting to soil fertility and all those things. So it's something that we have not even scratched yet, basically.
Yeah.
I think just to add to what Ronke is saying very quickly, and I think it's also important to note that in Nigeria, we're a one crop a year nation. We don't believe in dry season, right? For people that use irrigation, those are the private sector, the corporate farmers that can afford irrigation. Majorly in rural area, people depend on rain-fed irrigation. So to even meet up with the production level or to be able to compete in the market when this agreement is in place and there's cross-border trade, is being able to also produce the same number of tons as the competitors. There's a reason why Benin Republic supplies because 80% of the pineapples consumed there, while Edo cannot. Benin Republic has a year-round variety. In Nigeria, we don't. Do you understand? How are we going to open our borders to cope with that? I remember when we did the trade value, I think it was 80 million naira a day in trade with Benin Republic, and this is data from about 3-4 years ago. You know, if I get the numbers right. So imagine what that is when you actually open up the borders for full trade, where they can now take the pineapples beyond Lagos market. Do you understand? Are we ready for that kind of thing? You know, talk less of water management, where we're still focusing on one cycle, one really season irrigation. It's almost like lazy farming, where if water is not given to you from the sky, you're not going to farm. Do you understand? And we really need to go beyond that point. And to the question that was raised before about irrigation and whatnot, look, before we even start to talk about dams and all these things, even dams need to be channeled to farms. You're not going to draw a hose from a dam. Do you understand? So at the end of the day, irrigation is still going to be very key, because dam only provides a large body of water. You still need to channel that water body to your own farm, which is the irrigation itself, right? So you still need your pumps, you still need a plan, you still need to hire excavators, you still need all of this expertise and infrastructure in place. And those things are getting more and more, nobody's even talking about it. It's getting more and more expensive with the dollar. Everything we require to produce rice, for example, is hinged to the dollar. If you look at all the inputs, they're all imported. The fertilizer, components for blending fertilizer is imported. The water pump is imported. Tractor is imported. The everything you need is imported. The seed that is produced here, all require inputs. Do you understand? These same factors to produce them. So at the end of the day, what we have then is a crop that is hinged to the dollar. How do you compete? You see, so I'm just going to leave it there for people to ponder on a bit more.
Yeah. I mean,
thank you so much.
We've run like 8 minutes already.
So we're gonna.
So I would say let's keep the other questions for subsequent sessions. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Ola. I hope that you can all see my screen. So I've changed the background from our speakers who participated at today's session to our schedule for the rest of the year. Thank you so much, Rotimi and Ronke, for your valuable contributions. I mean, you really addressed the topic of sustainability in agriculture, looking at some more fundamental issues that I think are oftentimes ignored when we look at investments into Nigeria's agricultural landscape. Often the conversation is around investment machinery expertise, but more fundamental issues such as security are not really being dealt with when we talk about food security, and they're so intricately linked to each other. So thank you so much for sharing both your experience and your thoughts on sustainability, on food security, and the insecurity issue in Nigeria. We couldn't address all the questions that were asked by the audience, as Ola said, because of the fact that we've run out of time. But if you take a look at our series, we are dealing with the issue of water management and irrigation later on, but also data and climate smart agriculture. We're also looking at vocational training, international best practices, and also agri exports to EU markets, Also, the topic of financing comes up towards the end of the year. So we are addressing some of these topics that we have addressed or just briefly touched upon today later this year. So please stay with us through the series. Again, it's an informal breakfast meeting where we just want to rub minds and engage with audience, with stakeholders, with participants. Today we had private sector speakers. In some of our future sessions, we'll have speakers from ministries, from the public sector as well, from Germany. So it will be very engaging, very interesting, very informative as well. So please do stay with us. Again, sorry that we couldn't answer all the questions, but we will address them in future sessions. So thank you so much for being with us. And I'll invite our speakers again for just a closing word on sustainability and agriculture. What are your hopes and wishes for Nigeria?
Well, I will live with this one. I hope that in moving forward, the government does something very quickly with regards food production from the rural area. And like we discussed earlier, Yinka, I believe that the government should start focusing on how rural farmers can be more effective and more efficient on their smaller plots, so they can get the highest yield, right? While they sort of abandon the bigger farms. And this is just ways to sort of mitigate the effect of food security or food shortages, right? And that for me is a short to medium term solution to the current crisis for all the areas where the issues are going on. If you only have half a hectare, how do I produce the maximum yield on half a hectare to sort of mitigate the effect of me not farming on my bigger plot? Do you understand? And government should really needs to focus on that in the short term while they deal with the bigger issues of insecurity. I think that's one way to look at it. And irrigation is also very key, because then you are going to have to move from growing alone in the wet season to growing in the wet and the dry season. So if I'm producing 4 tons a year and on a small plot, I'm only able to produce 2 tons. Well, maybe if I produce in the wet and the dry season, I'm able to produce 5 tons altogether or 6 tons altogether. Do you understand? So I think that is what I'll leave on the table, and I hope that we wake up soon to the realities.
So for me, what I would like to see more is more collaborations and consolidations in the private sector, and for people to begin to, so like we had touched on associations and groups, and so for us to begin to have stronger, formidable groups come together. Let's put aside our individual and personal personal agendas, and look at it at the big picture. Look at the big picture that, if we let things be the way they are and continue that way, we may not have a Nigeria that is can feed itself. So how do we come together to leverage our various strengths and experiences and pool our resources together to, form a formidable group that can begin to challenge government policies and bring the most burning issues to the core, to ensure that the attention of government is drawn to us to, doing the things that are very important and needs to be done to get us moving from production. Because yes, there are so many things we really can't do without government stepping in to take a major role. But how can we begin to draw their attention to these things, especially when these things affect us? So that's one thing I would like to begin to see more, and hopefully that would also be a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rotimi. Thank you, Ronke, and thank you to every single participant. We had 80 people registered for today's session, which was much larger than we actually anticipated, because we wanted really small breakfast meetings that are somewhat intimate for a lot of engagement. So thank you so much for every single one of you who participated, who asked questions, who came and who showed up, and hopefully we'll see you again in future sessions. We also just briefly projected the upcoming Agri-Food and Plastic Pack exhibition, which is coming up at the end of May. So hopefully we'll see you there. But to find out more about that, please follow the link virtual-mia.net. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you again next month. Bye.
Yeah, bye. And for Agri-Food, you can reach out to me directly.
Bye, everyone, and thank you.
Bye, everyone.